Hi, I'm Amy Radin. I'm an independent advisor and expert on digital transformation and innovation. I'm here today at FundForum NextGen Distribution with Shundrawn Thomas.
Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to be here. And Shundrawn, you flew in from Chicago. You're with Northern Trust.
Yes, work with Northern Trust on the asset management side, running our funds and managed accounts business.
So you talked a lot in your presentation about some really key demographic trends and what the implications are for the industry. Could you speak a little bit about some of the most important trends that you see, and not just the implications, but what actions do you recommend the industry take to make those trends into opportunities?
Sure. Well, in terms of thinking about the demographic trends, I have to characterize things for myself, so I say the 4Gs. So you think about what we're seeing in terms of generational shifts. If we look at wealth going from, say, the baby boomers to Gen X and Gen Y, we think about geographical shifts. So we think about how population growth or GDP growth is changing around the world, raising the middle income in different places, and quite frankly, where affluence is as we look around the globe. If you think about it from a what I call group standpoint, so you have different ethnicities, even in established countries like our own, where you see the rate of wealth is growing faster among those ethnic minority communities. And then finally, you think about the shift from a gender standpoint. I believe it was reported about a year ago, for the first time, the private wealth among women exceeds that of men, women accounting for about 51% of private wealth. Well, if you think about the implications of that, I'll make it really simple. The typical client that the industry is accustomed to, that we really design a lot of our processes and approach around, that client is changing. It's already changed sort of while we were sleeping, but it's going to be dramatically different in the future. And so what I think that calls for is a couple of things. One, we've got to start using real data and empirical evidence and not just anecdote when we think about how we want to develop our business models and our service model approaches. We have to understand, because those client bases and segments are different, that we have to better shift the complexion of our own businesses and the people that we employ and that serve those clients to better reflect that. Because one of the challenges, as you know, in our business is we certainly haven't had the level of diversity reflected in our business that's reflected in the marketplace. The last thing is just really listening to the clients, because while clients want to be treated in a sense equitably, that doesn't mean that those clients don't appreciate their own differences and need to be served differently.
Sure, right. So that's a lot of change.
It is.
And most people, we build big businesses and then manage them for predictable outcomes. What do you think stops people? The people that you see in this industry, what are the biggest barriers to making these kinds of changes, adopting new technologies, diversifying the workforce?
Well, I think one of the basic things that sort of gets in the way or makes change more difficult is just we have a natural aversion to it. I mean, one of the things is when we're the ones that are causing the change, we're very comfortable with it. When we're the ones who, in a sense, have to adjust to it, I think it's a different type of mentality sometimes or approach. But the things that I think we can do to help us along that continuum is just, if we step back and realize we're in a dynamic business. And so our job is not so much about getting everything perfect. I like to say in the business of investments, it's about managing the probabilities. And so you don't have to make all the change at once, but having a mindset that says we're going to be continuous learners. So I think that's a big part of it. Because one of the things that I would also say impedes change is, in some respects, we stop learning. We stop looking at the research, we stop pushing ourselves to innovate, and as soon as you stop learning, I can assure you, you will stop changing. So I think there are some basic things that can help with the dynamic change environment that we're in.
Those are great suggestions. And what are you seeing happening in terms of innovation that you think holds big potential for this industry? There's so much going on.
So, and I know innovation is something that you focus a lot on. So we're seeing it in different spheres, right? So I think one of the things in our business is when people think about innovation and asset management, they tend to focus just on product innovation. But we know that there are two other important categories of innovation. If you think about innovation from a business model standpoint, or if you think about innovation from a thought leadership and a service standpoint, right? And so I think our biggest opportunities in asset management are actually in those two other categories. And so I would like to suggest that across financial services, the way that we make money, our business model, hasn't changed very much in decades.
No,
So
it
being
hasn't.
thoughtful and proactive and thinking about different ways we can distribute, different ways we can engage our clients, and ultimately different ways where we generate our revenues and our profits, that's part of our challenge and our opportunity. So again, changing the business model.
Right.
And then in terms of how we engage or serve our investing clients, the interesting thing is think about how our own preferences and likes have changed as we've seen all kinds of different industries evolve. I think about my own purchasing behavior. I laugh and I say, most of the things that I purchase now, I purchase online. I never leave, quote unquote, the comfort of my home. And if you'd asked me that 2 decades ago, I wouldn't have known that would have been my behavior. But companies have, in a sense, learned us and help us evolve in terms of how we engage with them by the way they engage with us. So again, innovation in terms of how we engage with and serve our clients, in some respects, is sorely lacking in our industry.
Right, right. And so the business model, you raise a good point, and the business model is under so much pressure.
Right.
Whichever way you look in this industry, seems like it's an imperative. That's an area that has to be innovated. Margins are coming down,
Right.
preferences are changing, the advisor workforce isn't what it used to be. Do you see new sources of business model leverage? If you looked into your crystal ball,
Right.
where are you looking to place bets in terms of where the leverage is going to be in the future?
Well, I think 2 of the places where I think are going to be opportunities and or enablers for those who are willing to really move forward from a business model change standpoint. The first is what I would say the engagement or the re-engagement of the actual, what I call beneficiary or shareholder. If you look at our business, one of the challenges for asset managers is in some respects, we have become further and further disintermediated from the actual beneficiary or investor. So
Right.
how can we effectively serve them? How can we effectively understand their preferences or their needs? So in a sense, the business model innovation that will not only help with cost, but quite frankly, more importantly, help us improve our service is in a sense getting close to the end beneficiary, the actual investing client again. The second thing is, it relates to that, technology will enable this. And
Sure.
so we really have to think of technology not so much as being a threat or a disruption, but again, being in a sense a weapon or an enabler. And so I think technology will make certain client segments more cost efficient to serve. It will allow us to better educate ourselves about our investing clients. It will allow us, in a sense, to deliver some things efficiently so that we can increase our touch points with our clients in ways we can't just, in a sense, by hand-to-hand combat. So those 2 categories of things I think will be tremendous enablers of
Right.
us to be able to change our business models.
Right. Sounds like an opportunity for revenue, not just expense reduction, which
Absolutely.
is often where
That's
the
right.
industry goes when it thinks about automation.
That's right.
Right. So digital is inevitable.
Right.
It's here to stay and a growing force. And with that comes the risk around cybersecurity.
Right.
We certainly see in the last few weeks lots of front page headlines on everybody seems to be hackable these days. How do you manage those 2? You've got to be digital,
Right.
but cybersecurity is going to be a threat that never goes away.
Right. Well, this is the question where you truly would have to have a crystal ball. What do we know for sure? We know the behaviors of investing clients and, in a sense, consumers broadly, so to speak, are just going to push more and more of our activity online. And with that is going to come the requisite risk. And so the way that I think about it is, as opposed to looking at it, quote unquote, just as a risk, I would transition the thought process to say, how could we think of this as a positive part of our value proposition?
Right.
So in a sense, if we know for sure that cybersecurity is a risk, as opposed to saying, well, that's a cost or it's a burden, how could we say, how can we differentiate our firm in such a way that we can present some of the things that we do, not that they're going to be perfect,
Right.
but they're going to better position people in a more, in a sense, risky environment when you're talking about their online or their personal security.
Right. Certainly could go a long way towards contributing to increasing the level of trust.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been a real pleasure to speak with you today. Best of luck with your strategy and everything that you're taking on at Northern Trust.
Well, thank you. Delightful to speak to you.